be able to watch myself over the course of the semester, because I got to see how I started, and then after I watched, it's like, I say a lot. I need to stop doing that. I was able to pick up on things that I needed to change and make my lessons run more smoothly.
It brings those things to your attention, and you can see, like, management things that you didn't catch. If there's a kid rolling around on the floor or something, you see it in the video, and maybe you were distracted by other things during the lesson and didn't see that. So you can kind of remember, like, where you need to be looking. And
when I was watching the video, there would be kids laying on their desks like this, and I had no idea that that was happening. And to like bring that to my attention, that kids don't sit in their chairs and they move around and they fall off their chairs, that was like good to watch.
It was also interesting to hear the back conversations. And I could hear them be like, what did she say? Or, I don't get it, do you get it? And then after that I knew what I needed to be clearer on.
Oh, there's a lot of times I wouldn't realize there's kids in the back talking, but the camera picked it up and I was like, oh, okay. I can't hear that where I am, but the camera can. So it tells you where you need to quiet it down.
My CT was wanting to video record this one student for evidence, for putting him in special education services to have like a documentation of his outbursts and what makes him what problems, when we were talking about like the antecedents and the consequences, like getting that on tape to have that to show to the administrators or whoever they need to show to. So that would be another useful thing, not just for like us, but the teachers I know benefited, at least mine.
Mine did too. Well, she didn't really watch me. She thought it was cool though. She would sit back and watch the computer screen while I did it just to see what it picked up on.
For us, my teacher when Mary herself was in the room observing, my teacher acted way different than when just the camera was there. So having an actual supervisor in the room helps cooperating teachers, I think, more than the camera.
My teacher would just kind of sit back and watch, no matter who was there or what was going on. She would let me deal with things unless kids were really messing around and doing things that I'd asked them already not to do.
My teacher wanted to do the camera. She wanted to move it around.
I should have asked my teacher to do that, but for a period of time I didn't have everybody's parents signed off, so I couldn't. We had to move seats, and we had to ask students to leave because they would be the ones that would pop up and put their face in front of the camera. So that was kind of a little difficult for me.
Yeah, that is the other difficult thing, is if you don't have permission for all the kids, what do you do? Do you not call on them? Do you make sure they stay out of the camera, but then if they want to cross
especially large group.
If you're doing a whole class, you don't want to ask the kids to step out because then they're missing instruction. But then
one of my students that didn't have permission is our one that calls out all the time, and he always has his hand up, and so I couldn't just keep ignoring him. So that's one thing. Get all the permission slips before filming.
Well, one of my girls, her parents don't want her video recorded. Like they have religious, they have a religious stance where they don't want their child to be video recorded. So like, what do you do in that situation where this one child, like their parents don't want them, they're not just being lazy about it. So that was like hard.
Can you talk a little bit about from what's the experience? Did any of you watch the videos of yourselves afterwards? Can you talk a little bit about just how you perceive the feedback of seeing yourself versus either not necessarily versus, but in addition to having a conversation with Mary, or if you can think back to what it was like to be observed and then have a conversation about it. What's the experience like when you actually go back and see yourselves? Is it different? I mean, to be able to see yourselves versus just talk about it?
I was able to pick up on what Mary said to me.
And
stuff, because she would say it to me and I was like, oh, okay. I kind of remember that. I'm like, all right, let me watch it. And I was like, I totally say, right, all the time. Take out that right, because I'm answering the question for them, so I have to work on that. That was one thing that
Yeah, sometimes there's just those things that you're doing, you're sort of aware of it, but you're not really aware of what you're doing until you watch it.
If you make yourself watch it like right away after, I think it's helpful because one video I watched like that day, like right after I taught it. Another one I watched like a week later because I got busy with other things, and that one not really as helpful when you watch it a long time after. But if you watch it right after, it's a lot more helpful than putting it off.
I was able to, you know, work on things. It's nice to have the video because you do get the constructive criticism from your supervisor, but then, you know, it's constructive, so they're not gonna pick out the little things, but you can do it to yourself
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
watch the video and be like, oh, I really messed up with that, and you don't have to feel so bad if somebody else telling you pick up on it on your own.
Yeah. And as you see the stuff on yourself that you're like, oh my god, that's so distracting. Why do I keep doing that? And you realize your students are thinking it's distracting too.
One of the things that I noticed is when I'm like in at the carpet and sitting in like the large chair, I don't call on the students like that I can't see. And so it was like good for me to say, like, when I was watching the videos, I don't call on you students. So, you know, like either I need to scoot back or you guys need to scoot forward. And like that was like instruction for the students I gave them, so they like, I don't know, I thought that was helpful that they know the video or the camera is useful. You know, it's not just like a silly little thing in the classroom. So
Yeah, I was able to pick up on who I called on a lot more. People to my right, it's like, you're not even there.
Yeah.
It's everybody on this side, so that's very helpful, because now I make sure to call on people and to alternate boy and girl, boy and girl.
Yeah.
I have a lot of kids that would raise their hand, but it was always the boys that would raise their hands. Girls are too quiet, so now I'm like, I call in a boy and a girl.
When I watched my classroom management video, I actually noticed the opposite. It was mostly girls raising their hands, so I was calling all on girls and very few boys. And there were a couple of boys that raised their hands, but they were messing around when they did it, so I called on somebody else instead.
It also brought to my attention of who I corrected for doing stuff wrong. Because there are some kids that are always doing something wrong, so, or not something wrong, but like being distracted or something like that. And so I'll always call on them, but then there's that one kid that just once in a while does something wrong, so I don't ever correct them. But now I'm like, oh, you can totally tell, but so I need to equal it out.
Can you just talk maybe a little bit more broadly about whether you think incorporating something like this as a general element of a teacher ed program might be beneficial for you know, future students or, you know, permanent faculty administrators? Like, maybe think of some of the implications of doing something like this on a longer range level. Think, you know, and if so or if not, you know, how you might improve the instruction or the program or, you know, anything like that.
well, I think if they do have it, I'd like it to be set up all the time. Or I don't know, setting up was so hard to do every time you taught, and it took so much time. Like I told you guys earlier that I would go in at 8:15, have to get ready to do the morning routine, and then that would take 15 minutes or 10 minutes, and then I would have to teach at 9 o'clock and have the video set up. So it's like, when do I set it up? When, you know, like that was really frustrating for me. So to have it like in a situation where it could be kept there and like just ready to go, I think would be helpful.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And then the kids are in the room, and the other teacher's trying to give a lesson, you're trying to get your video set up,
Yeah.
you are distracting so much away from the kids. And so if they're out of the room, it works, but if they're not, it just takes away a lot from actual instruction.
Yeah. And like you were saying, Alicia, it takes away from prep time for the
Mhm.
lesson too.
Right.
Because if you have to set up the camera, you can't do your prep for the rest of the lesson. There was one day I was working on getting ready for a lesson, and I had planned to tape it, and I just completely ran out of time to set up the camera.
Well, one thing that I would recommend if you're for doing the webcam with the CT or your supervisor at home and you at school is to connect to the internet with the hard wire, because the wireless, we were working on the wireless, it would take forever. I was teaching at 10:30 and I just started to connect to the website at like 10:10, and I wasn't connected until like, I don't know, 10:20 maybe, so it took like 10 minutes to connect. So it's the one thing that, make sure that there's like a hard wire connection. Otherwise it just, you know,
Yeah,
wireless can be so.
hmm
Yeah.
And I never had a problem with the wireless, but if
I
you
did.
did, then that would
conflict-wise.
be a really big problem for actually recording. You need the backup.
Yeah, and there's just so many technical things that can go wrong, so if that's the only thing you're relying on for observation wise, then it can
Yeah,
be
that's
difficult if
hard.
something doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
When the when it does work and your supervisor's at home and commenting back and forth, I know that when I would get the comments after my lesson and Mary would be there in the room, yeah, I'd get the comments, but it like I wouldn't always remember where they would go
Yeah, yeah.
with my lesson. And having her comments pop up on the side as I watched my video is a lot more helpful than just having those comments at the end, because I got to see what exactly she was talking about and where it hit exactly. So that was cool.
Yeah, I didn't get to experience that, but I think that would be helpful. So I've also gone back through the comments and had trouble figuring out quite where it fit in some of the time
So,
because I'm busy with my teaching and not remembering exactly.
we
what I'm
get
doing at
so
each point.
so many good comments and like the stars and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, oh, when did I do that? When did
Yeah.
she star
Mhm.
that? I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know because you can do a little asterisk
Mm-hmm.
on the keyboard, so it's the same effect. So.
And I don't know if what Mary thinks about it, but to have the, instead of writing down what the teacher is doing and then put a star next to it, if it would just be easier to put that star right away or to like message that. So I'm not sure how she does it, but I think that would be helpful on focusing more on the teaching and what the students are doing and what the teacher is doing besides just writing down.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the real time aspect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was very helpful. So I think overall, it's a good idea to do this as long as all the kinks are worked out. And I
Mhm.
realized we were
Yeah.
the first group to do it, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, making sure that that camera can either always be set up, or the internet's always working.
Mm-hmm.
You just, you know,
And
play with
maybe-
it every morning.
Yeah,
make sure
maybe
that
have, if it can't be set up all the time, have a designated place in the classroom or in the school where you can leave the equipment and know that
Yeah.
it's safe, so
Mhm.
you're not having to drag it back and forth every week, because that was kind of a hassle too.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Overall, it went well.
Do you think that if those kinks, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think setting up all the time would be a nightmare, and it's great to hear your feedback, and I'm really glad about how honest you're all being about the pros and cons, and that's very important, especially for me and everybody here to hear, so that you know we can. That's one thing that would be, you know, I think if let's say, you know, classrooms had like a designated computer and camera, or if the implementation was more on the school level and you could just kind of show up and teach, you know, if you didn't have to necessarily be responsible for the technological setup and stuff, how do you think that would impact your you know, your outlook on this for being incorporated into a teacher ed program, or you know, how would that, so basically can you separate sort of the, you know, if you didn't have to worry about the negatives associated with it, like how do you think that would affect your overall outlook on doing something like this on a more?
I think I'd be more willing to do it
Oh,
again
yeah.
if I didn't have
Definitely.
all the technical problems that
Mm-hmm.
that we had.
If it's just there and you go in and teach like you would any other day, then it would make it a lot easier.
Or
Definitely.
even if it was like Skype or something, you know, maybe not necessarily recorded, but your teacher's at home or your supervisor's at home watching you,
Mm-hmm.
then you're not having to worry about setting up the webcam. You can just, well, unless your webcam's not in with your computer, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, overall, without all the technical difficulties, I would highly recommend it because
Mm-hmm.
it's invaluable feedback that you get right away.
I know when I got my emails from Scooter, I would watch them like pretty much as soon as I got them, fast forwarding until when I started teaching. And I think like I looked forward to doing it. I was like really excited to record, you know, like the students and me. And I think that just to have that right after you teach in a practicum experience is so important, because like you know you start off teaching and you don't know these classroom management things and you don't know like how to implement these methods, and to see yourself like practicing is almost like you're doing it a second time,
Mm-hmm.
like you're getting another chance at like visiting the lesson that you just taught and different ways that you can like oh, I should have done that, or I like how I did that, or something.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you very much. That's excellent feedback.